Hello, hello. We're starting an audiobook, or at least doing part of an audiobook today on Wednesday, June 25th, 2025. My name is Mark Kulak, Houstonic.live. I think this is episode 1302 or 3 overall. And the book we are going to be starting today, or starting to chip away on, is a 2014 book by Dr. Judy Mikovits and Kent Heckenlively. Fortunately for us, there is an Amazon Audible audiobook available for this, which you can also attain if you have an Audible account. A lot of work goes into extremely clear narration, so why reinvent the wheel? So we are actually going to start this book. We're going to skip over an introduction chapter, which was written by her name was Hillary, I can't think of her last name right now, Johnson, Dr. Hillary Johnson, who writes, or has written anyways, fairly extensively about ME and CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome. This book is... I'll just say up front, it's about the big focus of the book, of course, is going to be the arrest of Judy Mikovits in the year, I think it was 2011. And the first chapter we're going to play, skipping over the Hillary Johnson chapter, is going to be the one titled Prologue, The Arrest. I think it is listed as 58 minutes at single speed. I'm going to play it at 1.3 speed, which should probably bring it down to 40 minutes and change. I think there's a lot to be said about this arrest. I'm not saying it's fake. It's not. But there's a story being told here, and then there's an even bigger story. And I think the even bigger story has something to do with this particular institute, and I think all of the genetic data, which is going to be available because of the people who are funding it, participating in it. And I've covered that elsewhere. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. And, of course, the topic of Harry Reid also comes up, and I played an old 10-year-old video today of Harry Reid talking about how what a great deal they had with a Iran nuclear deal. And... pitching it as he was the senior Democrat in the United States Senate some 10 years ago or so. So enough about me. Let's just get this going here. Let's just start this chapter and see where it goes.
Prologue. The Arrest. I began comparing Judy Mikovits to Joan of Arc. The scientists will burn her at the stake, but her faithful following will have her canonized. Dr. John Coffin. Friday, November 18th, 2011. Is Dr. Judy home? I'm Jamie. I'm a patient, and she knows me very well. She'll remember me. She said to come by any time. That's odd, Mikovits thought. Patients rarely showed up at her door. The only Jamie she could think of was miles across the ocean in Hawaii, hardly a place one comes from unannounced. That's okay, David. I'll take it, she said. She swept past her husband, giving him a quick glance to indicate everything was okay as she walked to the door of her Southern California beach bungalow. Judy often wondered what David must think of her crazy life. Did he know he was signing up for a roller coaster ride when they married? She might be the world-famous rock star scientist, but he was the rock. As a teenager growing up in Philadelphia, Judy's husband, David Nolby, had danced on Dick Clark's American Bandstand to musicians such as Sam Cooke, Neil Sedaka, and the Everly Brothers. In his professional life, he had been a personnel manager for various hospitals. He was the kind of man who was good at listening, understanding people, and diffusing tense situations. She was often called the brilliant one, but it was David who understood what others tried to keep hidden. The woman standing at the door was tall and dark-haired, dressed in black. Hi, Dr. Judy, the woman said. Do you remember me? Judy Mikovits had her Ph.D. in biochemistry and molecular biology from George Washington University and was an AIDS and cancer researcher of more than 30 years. But people often said she had a second career, a calling in the language of her strong Christian faith, as a patient advocate. Over the years, she had run volunteer cancer support groups and would often research and review treatment options for people and accompany them on doctor visits. Most people were terrified to be suddenly thrown into the medical system and were reassured by having someone along who understood the science. She also found that the majority of doctors welcomed the opinion of a researcher, as they often complained that they didn't have time to keep current with the latest research. Most people she helped referred to themselves as her patients, even though she was not a treating physician. In the past few years, she had moved from cancer research into a high-profile investigation of myalgic encephalomyelitis chronic fatigue syndrome, ME/CFS, taking the position of research director at the startup Whittemore Peterson Institute for Neuroimmune Disease, WPI, housed at the University of Nevada, Reno, UNR, campus. Mikovits developed the entire research program that culminated in an article in 2009 in the highly prestigious research journal Science, showing an association between a newly discovered human retrovirus, XMRV, xenotropic murine leukemia virus-related virus, and ME/CFS. There had been a partial retraction of the work a month earlier, but for many reasons, Mikovits still believed the theory was sound and needed rigorous validation. Over the past 5 years, Mikovits had counseled ME/CFS patients in much the same manner as she had counseled cancer patients, and felt she could tell pretty quickly if a person was suffering from the disorder. Patients were often unnaturally pale, sometimes too thin or overweight in a sickly way, and there was something about the eyes that looked different. She understood that calling what these patients suffered from fatigue was like calling the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima fireworks. Over a spectrum of severity, many of the most severely affected spent 23 hours a day in bed with the shades drawn because of their utter weakness and light sensitivity. Many of the patients had been active, vital people before their affliction struck, with a good number engaging regularly in rigorous athletic pursuits, like running marathons or long-distance cycling. Their physical breakdown was often looked upon by doctors as some sort of unconscious psychological disorder, as if these people who lived life to the fullest had simply decided that life was no longer worth the trouble. But the disease was without mercy, lasting for decades and taking decades from patients' expected lifetimes. The former chief of viral diseases for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, claimed the level of disability in many of these patients was similar to terminal AIDS patients and those in end-stage renal failure, so patient comparisons to a living death were apt. But the years generally did not bring death, although an unusual number of patients developed rare types of cancers, salivary gland tumors, or B-cell lymphomas. This fact, more than any other, is what drew the former cancer and AIDS researcher toward this research. Why would years of a fatiguing illness result in an elevated rate of rare types of cancer? She felt there were some intriguing avenues to explore. Yes, Judy Mikovits had learned a great deal about ME/CFS in the past 5 years. Judy stared at the woman in her doorway and felt a sudden chill. She was certain the woman didn't have the disease and that she wasn't a patient she had ever seen before. "I don't know you," Mikovits said to the woman and began to push the door shut. Regan Harris first got to know Mikovits when she called the WPI in December of 2009 after reading the Science article. Regan was surprised and flustered to suddenly be speaking to an internationally recognized scientist, but Mikovits quickly put her at ease and asked Regan to share her story. With a deep breath, Regan began by telling Mikovits she had become sick in October of 1989, at the age of 14 after a bout of mononucleosis. The following year, she had been diagnosed with ME/CFS, and from that point on, life had been a roller coaster ride. Despite her ME/CFS, Regan had been able to graduate high school and had attended college where she received a bachelor's degree in psychology. While getting her degree, Regan researched the issue of suicide among the ME/CFS population and how these patients presented with a different psychological profile than people with depression. Regan's work eventually culminated in a poster presentation before a meeting of the American Psychology Society in 1998. After listening to Regan's tale, Mikovits told her about an ongoing research study and asked if she would like to participate. "I can never give you back the years of your childhood that were stolen from you," said Mikovits, "but I think we can prevent this from happening to other kids. Will you help me take this thing down forever?" Galvanized by Mikovits' confidence, Regan signed the forms and went to the grand opening of the $77 million WPI and Center for Molecular Medicine at the University of Nevada, Reno in August of 2010. There she met Annette and Harvey Whittemore and their daughter Andrea, who had also been struck with ME/CFS from a young age. Regan couldn't wait to make her own contribution to this effort. Regan moved to Nevada in September of 2010. She planned on volunteering for the WPI, hoping it would lead to a paying job. Judy and David were warm and welcoming, often taking Regan out to sample the local cuisine. When Regan first arrived, David spent some time driving her around Lake Tahoe, eventually shuttling her to Glenbrook, the exclusive gated lakefront neighborhood where the Whittemores had one of their many residences. When David approached the gatekeeper at Glenbrook, the large gates opened as he said, "Whittemore." When they got to the Whittemore home, a historical residence known as the Lakeshore House, complete with its own private dock, David motioned with a hand and said, "What do you do when your family is too big to fit in one house? You buy the one next door as well." The Whittemores owned 2 houses on Lake Tahoe. When Regan flew home to Massachusetts that Christmas, she couldn't wait to tell her mother all about her run-in with the Nevada royalty. Regan gushed about the wealth and influence of the Whittemores, noting, "My God, they've even got a movie theater in their house. You would not believe this, Mom. Can you imagine what it's going to be like if I can work for them? It would be so cool." Regan's excitement was not fully celebrated by her New England mother, who said, "Regan, I never want you to be seduced by money and power. You remember one thing. Anybody who is powerful enough to give you everything is also powerful enough to take it all away." Mikovits had almost latched the door when she heard a male voice shouting, "Hold on there." A man, identifying himself as University of Nevada, Reno campus security, stepped out from behind one of the large bushes in her yard and strode quickly to the door. Dr. Mikovits knew this man. He had investigated the robberies that had taken place at the WPI when she had been the research director, where she had been research director. That was in the past now. On September 29, 2011, she was fired, receiving the dismissal call on her cell phone from Annette Whittemore, president of the WPI, as she walked home. While the experience of being fired could shake anybody, how many could claim the news had been reported in the pages of the Wall Street Journal? The article by the well-respected journalist Amy Doxer Marcus in her health blog section of the Wall Street Journal had given a fair account of her firing. Whittemore told the health blog that she and Mikovits were not seeing eye to eye on who controlled the cells. Research on retroviruses and their possible connection to CFS, as well as other diseases, continues, she said. "We will keep going down that path as long as it continues to show promise," Whittemore says. Annette Whittemore's given reasons for firing Mikovits would change several times over the ensuing months, but she detailed them in a letter sent to Dr. Mikovits on September 30, 2011, which, among other things, accused Dr. Mikovits of insubordination. On October 1, 2011, Dr. Mikovits sent a response to Annette Whittemore addressing the event that had ostensibly caused her firing, as well as more concerns she had about the management of the WPI. Mikovits told Annette that as the principal investigator on the National Institutes of Health, NIH, R01 grant, Mikovits alone was legally responsible for all resources on that grant, and that Mikovits alone was the one who should have decided the appropriate allocation of those resources. Mikovits was pleased that Annette hoped for a smooth transition regarding Mikovits's departure. However, as Mikovits was the principal investigator on 3 grants housed at the WPI, 2 from the NIH and 1 from the Department of Defense, DoD, she told Whittemore that she fully intended to continue her research on those same grants, but at another institution, once one was found. This is common practice in the scientific community. The principal investigator takes the grants with her if she leaves the institution. Her break 6 weeks earlier with the Whittemores had been sudden, but Mikovits was eager to move forward with her life and research. The next day, she was scheduled to fly out to New York City to participate in the celebration of a multi-million-dollar ME/CFS initiative to be run by ME/CFS physician Dr. Derek Enlender of Mount Sinai Hospital. Mikovits and Enlender were also scheduled to discuss ways in which they might collaborate after her departure from the WPI. But she would never make that trip. A thud at her feet made Dr. Mikovits look down. She realized the woman had dropped a microphone and a recording device. "That's illegal here," said Mikovits. "You can't record me without my permission." "We're just here to get your side of the story," replied the woman as she picked up the fallen items. "Fine then. You can come with me to my lawyer's office. I'm on my way to meet him." Mikovits again tried to close the door when 3 burly Ventura County Sheriff's deputies came around from the driveway. One of the deputies was brandishing a yellow piece of paper. "We have a search warrant." The deputies came onto the landing, pushed the door open, and proceeded to enter the house, pushing Mikovits' husband along with them. "David," she called out, "call the lawyer." Just that morning, she had called her attorney's office to ask if there were any warrants out for her arrest. On November 4th, the WPI had filed a civil case against her, claiming she left with intellectual property, specifically her notebooks and computer files. As a principal investigator on 3 government grants, Mikovits knew she was legally required to maintain and protect copies of all data under federal regulations and her UNR contract as an adjunct professor. In addition, since her research was being challenged by the scientific community, she needed to possess this information to defend the work. The attorney had found her trepidation humorous and said he didn't see anything that serious arising out of the civil case. Just to calm her, he had checked. There were no arrest warrants. But Mikovits still sensed something terrible afoot. She believed she had caused her former employers considerable distress. Viral Immune Pathology Diagnostic, VIP-DX, a for-profit clinical lab loosely associated with the WPI and owned by the Whittemores and Lombardi, was selling an unvalidated diagnostic test for the XMRV retrovirus, one which they would later discontinue selling. They claimed that she had approved VIP-DX's tests, including a new serological one announced under her name, when she was not employed by VIP-DX and had not evaluated data or statements made by the clinical lab. Mikovits believed she had cut off a lucrative source of revenue for the WPI when she had vocalized all of this on September 23, 2011, at the Ottawa conference, saying, "VIP-DX lab will not continue XMRV testing because it hasn't been shown to be reproducible in the blood working group, BWG." She was fired 1 week later. Others were already concluding the test was problematic after the release of the report from the BWG, the group founded to investigate whether the retrovirus posed a threat to the blood supply. Next came the replication study coordinated by Dr. Ian Lipkin of Columbia, one of the world's most famous virologists. A few days after Mikovits was fired, Lipkin had called to ask if she had confidence in the integrity of her former employers, the Whittemores, to allow her to perform the study in Reno. Mikovits told Lipkin that she did not have confidence that the study could be performed at the WPI. It was not until November 14, 2011, that Lipkin emailed Mikovits saying he had decided not to have the WPI participate in the study, a decision which would potentially cost the Institute a great deal of money. Despite these financial hardships to the Whittemores, Mikovits believed she was acting the only way she knew how, as an ethical scientist. The woman in black took Mikovits by the arm and motioned for her to come out onto the porch. "We just want to hear your side of the story," the woman repeated. "Do you have any WPI property?" "I do not," Dr. Mikovits answered. "Everything in this house is mine." She knew what they were looking for: the research notebooks. The notebooks which she feared would have ended up on the bottom of Lake Tahoe, been altered, or otherwise kept from public view had she not secured them. The open access to research, especially research funded by the government, was the property of all. She didn't have the notebooks, didn't even know where they were, but she knew they were safe. She believed that her assistant, Max Post, had secured them. Whatever she had discovered, or the mistakes she had made, the evidence would be there for all the world to see. "Do you have a black laptop?" the woman in black asked. "Yes, it's sitting right on the table, but it's mine. It was a gift." "From whom?" "Annette Whittemore." Mikovits remembered the extravagant 2007 Christmas party, the first WPI Christmas party, when Annette had presented her with the black laptop, a backup disk drive, and a printer. The only stipulation Annette put on her present was that Mikovits had to promise to back up the hard drive on the disk drive that stayed at the lab. Thus, as Mikovits understood it, there should be 2 copies of all data, one for the principal investigator, Mikovits, and one backed up on the drive at the lab. Annette even gave Mikovits the receipt for the computer in case there were any problems. The Whittemores were political contributors to U.S. Senator Harry Reid, a Democrat and the majority leader of the Senate, as well as many other politicians. All four of Harry Reid's sons had at one time worked for the law firm where Harvey Whittemore was a senior partner. In addition, Harvey Whittemore had personally
Okay, well, there's I made a mistake in an earlier video saying the Whittemores had sons that were working at at Harry Reid, Senator Harry Reid's office. It's the opposite. Harry Reid had four sons working at the offices of Harvey Whittemore. Okay, so I apologize for that mistake and for the other videos that I made that mistake in. Let me just go back 30 seconds to restart.
Annette even gave Mikovits the receipt for the computer in case there were any problems. The Whittemores were political contributors to U.S. Senator Harry Reid, a Democrat and the majority leader of the Senate, as well as many other politicians. All four of Harry Reid's sons had at one time worked for the law firm where Harvey Whittemore was a senior partner. In addition, Harvey Whittemore had personally helped advance the legal careers of two of Reid's sons, and one of the sons, Leif Reid, had become Whittemore's personal lawyer. In a 2006...
Just to note here, that is a very tight connection. So Senator Harry Reid, who's pushing the Iran nuclear deal through Congress almost 10 years ago today. Well, 9 years and 10 months or whatever it is. And four of Harry Reid's sons work at Whittemore's law office. Two of Harry Reid's sons have a lot to thank for their initial political ambitions, thanks to the Whittemores. Leif Reid, at one point, had become just another son, one of the sons of Harry Reid, the personal lawyer, personal attorney for Harvey Whittemore. I mean, these are a lot of connections. And the Whittemores are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They might be billionaires, but at the very least, hundreds of millions of dollars. And when they go to an event, they can give away multi-$100,000 gifts. I remember driving by. I think I actually saw their homes on Lake Tahoe because we did a small family trip out there recently. I think I know the homes. Those homes are $50, $80 million homes, easy. And if they have two of them side by side, I mean, they're made out of like stone block. You could not reproduce them today. Even if you had the money, it's almost impossible to even find the laborers. It's incredible. So this is a serious connection. And again, we've said this before, Annette Whittemore is one of the few hundred, possibly in the thousands, children of Dr. Quincy Fortier. Annette Whittemore's maiden name is Fortier, so she's one of the 5 children. So this is a very incredible connection between one of the children of that Quincy Fortier and with her husband and Harry Reid and so on, creating this unique, one-of-a-kind center that was able to attain $80 million in startup money to get the center going. This is something very big, and this is where Judy Mikovits finds herself. And it's a little confusing, the book, because it's going back and forth between one story and then it's trying to do this weird flashback thing. And sometimes this stuff doesn't always come through in a book, in particular during a narration such as this. But let's just go back and restart.
Had to promise to back up the hard drive on the disk drive that stayed at the lab. Thus, as Mikovits understood it, there should be 2 copies of all data, one for the principal investigator, Mikovits, and one backed up on the drive at the lab. Annette even gave Mikovits the receipt for the computer in case there were any problems. The Whittemores were political contributors to U.S. Senator Harry Reid, a Democrat and the majority leader of the Senate, as well as many other politicians. All 4 of Harry Reid's sons had at one time worked for the law firm where Harvey Whittemore was a senior partner. In addition, Harvey Whittemore had personally helped advance the legal careers of 2 of Reid's sons, and one of the sons, Leif Reid, had become Whittemore's personal lawyer. In a 2006 article in the Los Angeles Times, Harvey Whittemore is quoted as saying, "You have to understand how close the Whittemore and Reed families are. My relationship with Senator Reed goes back decades." Harvey Whittemore was often identified as one of the most politically influential individuals in the state of Nevada, earning nicknames such as the 64th Legislator for his help in drafting the state's first business tax, and being among a select group of 4 wealthy men known as the Power Rangers, after the popular Saturday morning children's show. One reporter of Nevada state politics had quipped, "Governors come and go, but the Power Rangers stay the same." Ominously, one of Harvey's former associates said, "Harvey Whittemore has a different moral compass than the rest of us." One of the Whittemore's children, their daughter Andrea, had been struck down with ME/CFS when she was just 11 years old. Her parents were tireless in trying to find a cure for her, and through the work of Mikovits and others, Andrea, now in her 30s, was close to recovering her health. This personal connection to the disease made Mikovits believe that she and the Whittemores would always be on the same side. The case brought by the WPI against Mikovits.
Okay, so let's review what they just say here. Annette Whittemore, one of the many children of Quincy Fortier, as part of this power couple, one of the most powerful couples in the state of Nevada. And I don't think it's more possible for a couple to be more connected with Harry Reid than the Whittemores are. So this means the Whittemores, this family, okay, is wrapped up as tight as anyone else in the world with the senior Democrat in the United States Senate that's pushing through the Iran nuclear deal. It seems like a bit of a stretch, but it isn't. That's the truth. Now, how are they connected? Well, it is stated here that one of the reasons why the Whittemore family got involved in this is because they have a daughter, Andrea, who therefore is also one of the thousands of grandchildren of Quincy Fortier. And Andrea came down with ME/CFS when she was 11. I remember reading somewhere it was like 1989. And then she got better. They tried some treatments, Ampligen, this weird thing that they were tried with her, which, by the way, is also related to HIV. And she got better, and then her health went downhill when she had an MMR shot in her late teens or 20s or something like that. And then she had to struggle back again. Anyways, it's what this means is that one of the key subjects, if you will, one of the key people that is the focus of the research. I mean, institute isn't there for to treat Andrea Whittemore. That's not why it's there. However, it's noteworthy that if there were to be any cell cultures taken, if there were to be any other genetic tests done with Andrea Whittemore, her family tree is, because of being connected to Quincy Fortier, is probably one of the biggest family trees that has existed since Genghis Khan, who probably some people think had children with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of women. I don't even know if that's possible. At some point, it's like there's only so much time in a day. But anyways, you get the point. All right, so continuing on.
This was an unusual one, according to her civil attorney, Dennis Neal Jones. The complaint alleges what I guess you could call industrial espionage, and the defense is basically a whistleblower kind of defense. It was much different than the typical cases Jones handled. Both Jones and Mikovits' bankruptcy attorney, David Follen, would be disturbed, however, by the legal maneuverings deployed against Mikovits. As attorneys, they understood the combativeness of the judicial system, but also knew there were rules and an expected logical progression of events. But this case seemed very different from the start, in both the legal aspects and the response of the scientific community. It seems like the field was stacked against Judy, and it's continued to be so. Any allegations she was convicted of a crime or that there was a successful judgment against her is wrong, said Follen. Judy is just an amazing person. She's probably one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. All Judy wants is fairness, and I can't understand how her profession can turn its back on such a talented individual who has so much to offer and could help so many people. When Mikovits thought about it later, she realized the problems had actually started soon after Mikovits and Annette Whittemore first appeared on a TV show in 2009 called Nevada Newsmakers, shortly after the publication of the landmark article in Science linking a new human retrovirus to ME/CFS.
So if you're interested in watching that, I should have it organized a little bit better than this, but if you go to my shared videos 2024 on Houstonic.live or HoustonicITS.com under playlists and scroll down, you'll find it. I think it's about halfway down. Let's go a little bit here. If it's not here, then I found it in 2023. Here we go. So this is Annette Whittemore on the left, and this is Judy Mikovits on the right. Annette Whittemore, president and founder of Whittemore Peterson Institute, and Judy Mikovits, director of the research. This is actually an October 8th, 2009 video on Nevada Newsmakers. Here, by the way, they are talking about, 2009. Annette Whittemore and Mikovits first appeared together on a TV show in 2009 called Nevada Newsmakers. And perhaps at some point after the end of this chapter, maybe in the next episode, we'll re-watch that video together because it has some pretty explosive allegations.
Mikovits and her team found evidence of the retrovirus in 68 out of 101 patients, 67%, with CFS, as compared to 8 out of 218, 3.7%, of healthy controls. As if it weren't enough that they were taking on a disease which had been looked upon for more than 30 years as some form of female hysteria, they were now planning to take on one of modern medicine's most controversial diseases, autism.
And then not long after this, 10 years or 8 years, however you want to count it, she's not hired by Children's Health Defense, but Judy Mikovits is part of the Children's Health Defense, team or group. She is with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and other people at Children's Health Defense, which does talk a lot about autism. Now, the autism spectrum disorder is, I have to be careful saying it's a little bit of a myth. It is an easier way is to call it an injury. And I think that's where the questions come in. How much of what autism is really just an injury versus something which is genetic? There is, of course, there is a desire to not say it's an injury, to say it's, if it does exist at all, right? You can't give people, you can't let people make too many claims without them feeling thankful for being able to say anything. But first you have to say there's no such thing as autism or something like that. And then say, well, if there is, it could be just genetic. And then people are going to be going down that path. So if we're looking at which people have ME/CFS, and if we are trying to find other things which are correlated to it, and if we happen to find maybe autism is connected to it somehow, I don't know, or the research that finds one finds the other, we are now potentially talking about things which involve a genetic factor. And again, I remind you, finding a genetic factor, if you're looking for people who happen to have a disease or disorder, saying that the disorder is caused by some genetic factor or condition, wouldn't it be advantageous to do such research where the subjects or some of the subjects happen to have a few dozen, or better yet, a few thousand genetic relatives who are very close to them, and then start to looking for differences? It is really a stroke of luck. It's almost a 1 in a million that this is just coincidentally the institute. The institute involves a subject, and of course the founder, who are in the wide family tree of Dr. Quincy Fortier, the long-standing doctor of the state of Nevada.
It's not in the paper, and it's not reported, Mikovits said, speaking hesitantly at first. But we've actually done some of these studies, and we found the virus present in a significant number of autistic samples that we've tested so far. The show's host noted that this news had tremendous potential for the autism community, holding out the possibility that this might lead to treatments or even a cure. Mikovits replied by saying XMRV might be linked to a number of neuroimmune diseases, including autism. It certainly won't be all, because there are genetic defects that result in autism, but there are also the environmental effects.
Whoa. Look at that sentence. How did he say it? How did Judy Mikovits say it? It certainly won't be all, meaning XMRV may not be connected to everything. And autism. It certainly won't be all, because there are genetic defects that result in autism. There are. And she says it with incredible certainty. There are. Well, are there? Are there? Maybe there are. But to say that there's a genetic defect that causes autism, that suggests that there is a switch somewhere in our DNA code, if you want to view it like that, that when it's set one way, we don't have autism, and then another way, we do have autism. Why would we have code in our, if you want to view people as a software, that says have autism? Does that make any sense? Why would that switch even be there? Another way of looking at this, I've used this example before. Imagine if there's a horrible plane accident, a large passenger plane accident. All we know is that there was an explosion while the plane was in the air, a massive explosion. And it's not even clear if it was a mechanical failure, an electrical failure, a bomb, a terrorist, maybe something hit the plane. You know, there's a lot of things, I guess, and there's probably other scenarios which could have resulted, some other act of nature, which could have resulted in the plane blowing up. And imagine saying with certainty that you need to determine if the plane software was set to explode over the Pacific Ocean or not. There's no setting there for that. Why would ever someone even ask the question, oh, I wonder if the plane had a setting where it was set to true to explode in the air over the Pacific Ocean? There's no setting like that. Nor do I think that there's a switch somewhere for a baby that says have autism or don't have autism. Now, there's maybe some people, because of their nature, combined with a variety of other environmental, I don't know, maybe, but genetic defects that result in autism. And to say it with that level of certainty, I don't know about that. However, going back, again, if you believe that one of the most sought after, I should say one of the most discussed, one of the most controversial, one of the things that more people are perhaps interested in just about anything else, autism, and you're talking about autism as being caused by genetics, what are the odds that you're doing so at an institute that has a founder and her children, and one of their children being one of these CFS patients, that has tens of thousands of relatives, and Annette Whittemore's children, you could probably easily say many thousands of cousins, of first cousins. It's the odds of this are minimal. I should say are very low of that happening just coincidentally. So I think these things are related. I think that given how hot this topic is it possible? Is it possible that knowing that the Human Genome Project and genetic research is protected by the United States Department of Energy and Q clearances because of the concerns of weapons of mass destruction and nuclear weapons, is it possible the fact that Harry Reid's relationship with the Whittemore family played in to using the situation. It wasn't planned, but using the situation that Annette Whittemore happens to be one of the bloodlines, one of the several hundred or thousand kids of Dr. Quincy Fortier, the baby god. And then use that, take advantage of it. Collect data, start doing some research, and see what you can find. And then you can protect it, using some type of shell game here. And this is where Mikovits is. Now, I'm not saying that Mikovits is fighting this, but something happened to cause this relationship to go south. More than likely, Judy Mikovits, because she's no dummy. She was running a retroviral lab for the National Cancer Institute. Okay, she was a lab director. She knows what she's doing. Odds are there was a plan for her to come on board probably 2 or 3 years before she even did. But things had to go in a particular order. That's what I suspect. But I think these things are connected. So I'm just going to go back a little bit.
The show's host noted that this news had tremendous potential for the autism community, holding out the possibility that this might lead to treatments or even a cure. Mikovits replied by saying XMRV might be linked to a number of neuroimmune diseases, including autism. It certainly won't be all, because there are genetic defects that result in autism, but there are also the environmental effects. Then, barely taking a breath, she crossed the Rubicon. There's always the hypothesis that my child was fine, then they got sick, and then they got autism. Interestingly, on that note, if I might speculate a little bit, this might explain why vaccines lead to autism in some children, because these viruses live and divide and grow in the lymphocytes, the immune response cells, the B and T cells.
Okay, and this is where the alarm bells should be going off again, and this time going off even louder. She's opening the door here to some people maybe getting autism after a vaccine shot. Except it's not going to be because of an injury, as Brian Hooker said. At least he used to say in 2013. It's going to be because a dormant virus was woken. A virus that is just there, minding in its own business, and it's disturbed and woken up. This is a phrase, latent and dormant viruses. It suggests that there are viruses that are just there, and possibly endemic. Maybe even like HIV, or HTLV3, or HHV6, or something like that. Something that everybody has. A virus that everybody just has. It's endemic. We know it's endemic. And maybe sometimes the vaccine wakes up the sleeping virus, which then leads to all the problems. It's no fault of the vaccine. It's just bad luck. And, of course, the way to solve the problem, because we know vaccines work, Judy Mikovits would never question the possibility of a vaccine working. Never question the possibility. It's just a matter of maybe we need to make the vaccines differently. Maybe we should use gene therapy vaccines, for example. Or we just need to continue to do more research to avoid those scenarios. It's amazing how a spike protein coronavirus going around the world, coming out of a mud puddle, going endemic, would actually provide a nice base story, which could then be used in the future to advance to the next stage of the Human Genome Project. So this is a 2014 book. It's so interesting, the words that were used then versus the words that get used now. Go back and restart.
Then, barely taking a breath, she crossed the Rubicon. There's always the hypothesis that my child was fine, then they got sick, and then they got autism. Interestingly, on that note, if I might speculate a little bit, this might explain why vaccines lead to autism in some children, because these viruses live and divide and grow in the lymphocytes, the immune response cells, the B and T cells. So when you give a vaccine, you send your B and T cells and your immune cells into overdrive. That's its job. Well, if you're harboring one virus and you replicated a whole bunch, you've now broken the balance between the immune response and the virus. So you could have had the underlying virus and then amplified it with that vaccine and then set off the disease, such that your immune system could no longer control other infections and created an immune deficiency.
An immune deficiency. And I have to come on the screen. I have to show up on the screen even. Do you hear that? An immune deficiency. An immune deficiency that you acquired. I wonder if there is a phrase, an acronym for an acquired immune deficiency syndrome. Oh, that's right, AIDS. This is to suggest that AIDS is nothing more than one of these, well, I shouldn't say nothing more, but lumping all of this stuff together. AIDS, chronic fatigue, autism, HIV, cancers, etc. It's all caused because there's just really nefarious, bad viruses which are out there. They're endemic, and they can be disturbed every once in a while. It's not, it's not really because we should be avoiding vaccines. We just need different types of vaccines, better vaccines, smarter vaccines. If it wasn't for the way things panned out during the pandemic, okay, Judy Mikovits had to put on a show to be crunchier and crunchier and wackier and wackier. Judy Mikovits probably otherwise would have been at the ACIP panel today. That's I think she was on that trajectory at one point instead of Robert Malone.
If these children were harboring a retrovirus, it wasn't an outlandish claim to make. It has long been established that children born to HIV-infected mothers shouldn't be immunized until they're on antiretroviral drugs and their tests show the virus to be at extremely low levels. As explained at the University of California at San Francisco webpage on HIV and immunizations, activation of the cellular immune system is important in the pathogenesis of HIV disease, and that fact has given rise to concerns that the activation of the immune system through vaccinations might accelerate the progression of HIV disease. These observations suggest that activation of the immune system through vaccinations could accelerate the progression of HIV disease through enhanced replication. If feasible, it is preferable to have patients on antiretroviral therapy, ART, prior to receipt of vaccination. Just as one wouldn't want an immunization to provoke AIDS in an HIV-positive child, one would also want to be sure a vaccination didn't trigger autism. Mikovits and Annette Whittemore had both grabbed onto the third rail of Western science, the question of vaccine injury and the increasing numbers of children with neurodevelopmental problems. The scientific community, often choosing comfortable yet unproven dogma over testing controversial ideas, made the funding of routine grant proposals even more difficult after the interview. The saga of Harvey Whittemore's Coyote Springs development had started in 1998, when he purchased 43,000 acres of remote Nevada desert about an hour northeast of Las Vegas. The dry landscape was originally considered to be so barren that its best use was thought to be a weapons test range. One reporter referred to the single outpost of civilization they'd been able to build on that godforsaken land as the golf course at the end of the world. But Harvey Whittemore had big dreams. He envisioned 10 golf courses as an anchor for retirees and hard-working families who wanted the good life but couldn't afford Vegas prices. In addition to the already built Jack Nicklaus signature course, there would eventually be 159,000 housing units. If fully realized, Coyote Springs would become the second-largest city in Nevada. But it had all fallen through as the recession of 2008 started to take its toll and real estate markets across the country had bottomed out. As of 2011, none of the housing units had been built and only the single golf course had been completed. The writer remarked that Nicklaus's single green golf oasis in the dry-brush country of jagged edges and steep lines made it look like a vista out of the classic 1968 science fiction movie, Planet of the Apes. And yet there was something audacious about Harvey Whittemore's ambitions, even in light of his troubles. The reporter who dubbed it the golf course at the edge of the world also gave what might be considered a eulogy for many of Whittemore's projects. After first writing that normally when one sees a development gone bad, you simply think the developer put his money in the wrong place and give a figurative shrug. The developer will go on to a new project. But a golf course, at least one made with such high levels of devotion and talent as this one, is different. "You're under arrest," said the woman in black, slapping a pair of handcuffs on Mikovits. "But it's my laptop," Mikovits protested. The police would take and hold for almost 1 year not only Mikovits's black laptop, but also her iPad, iPhone, the MacBook Air she had recently purchased for her Ireland trip, and the silver laptop of her stepdaughter, who had been staying with them for a few days. "Don't say anything," David called out. "I won't," she shouted back. 4 unmarked sheriff's cars immediately came around the corner from Harbor Boulevard, staging what might have looked to the casual observer like an episode of America's Most Wanted, rather than the apprehension of a figure in a scientific controversy. Mikovits, 5'4" of her, frizzy blonde hair, and just a shade over 140 pounds, stood on the road in her white jogging shirt and black knee-length shorts. She was shoeless, having left her flip-flops on the floor in the bathroom. One of the deputies noticed she was barefoot and asked if she had anything back at the house. "I was wearing my flip-flops," she replied. An officer went into the house to retrieve her shoes. "Why am I being arrested?" Mikovits asked one of the deputies. "You are a fugitive from justice." The arrest of Mikovits would confuse every legal expert who looked at the facts of this case for a simple reason. Nobody involved in any of these proceedings ever produced an arrest warrant. Under what law could a middle-aged scientist be taken into custody without an arrest warrant? The question would remain unanswered. A deputy returned with Mikovits's flip-flops, and she was able to put them on her feet. A sheriff's deputy opened the back door, and she was escorted into the squad car for the 8-mile drive to the Ventura police station. At the police station, she was taken to an interrogation room and read her Miranda rights by an officer. "Yes, I want an attorney, and I'll remain silent," she told him. The woman who had identified herself as Jamie, now revealed as a member of the University of Nevada, Reno campus police, was also in the interrogation room. "We'll give you a chance to go back to Reno," she said. One has to wonder how many times the UNR campus police have crossed the Nevada border to make an arrest of an adjunct professor in Southern California. Mikovits wondered if the whole song and dance had been an attempt to intimidate her so that she would agree to let the WPI participate in the Lipkin study, which would represent at least $250,000 for the WPI. Arrest her in her home, drag her back to Reno, and let her stew in a jail cell until she agreed to let the WPI back into the Lipkin study. And if she didn't agree, who knew what might happen to her in a Nevada jail cell?
Let's just add this much. If this Whittemore family is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions, maybe even $1 billion, they have tens or hundreds of millions invested in this Coyote Spring development, which is it never came into to pass. But the Jack Nicklaus golf course was still there. It's still there. You can see the little green oasis on the map north of Las Vegas. And let's say Mikovits is leaving, and she's taking a couple $1 million of grant money at most, and maybe $500,000. This says, would the Whittemore family really go out of their way to engage that many law enforcement officers, and even ultimately the FBI? Gets invested later on, all to save a few $100,000 or a few million. Now, maybe it was personal for them. That's a possibility. People think irrationally when it's personal, but it feels like it's something else. And I still don't know what the answer is. But I suspect it has something to do, well, of course, with the data that she found. And this abstract, story of, well, we found some XMRV or whatever. Is it possible? Is it possible? Is it possible? Holy cow. Is it possible that they were taking advantage of genetic characteristics of a family or some who had extensive relatives in order to create or justify a story of something going endemic? I mean, if you wanted to prove that a high percentage of people had a virus, boy, wouldn't it be awesome if you just happened to, I don't know, sample a whole bunch of people from a family tree that has of hundreds, if not 1,000 or more people with the same dad. And imagine what level of a scandal that would be as that story is trying to be told. I don't know. I'm just throwing out there the possibility. And then what you will have to do is you have to juice it up a little bit, okay? You need to have some police. You need to have some cop cars. You need to have a story. You need to have an arrest. You need to confiscate the materials and then throw them into a volcano. I don't know. But Judy Mikovits' story about this has always been Fauci's bad. Fauci's bad. He's evil. And unfortunately, the majority of other citizen journalists who might have different opinions about things such as, I don't know, nuclear weapons, okay, they don't really go against the grain. However, when it comes to me, I'm trying to find, a more genuine, a more likely scenario to explain these things. And I don't think it's Fauci bad. I don't think it's Fauci at all in this case. So this all comes from, really, I'll review again towards the end. And it involves Ian Lipkin. Ian Lipkin, by the way, is also on the early COVID survivors list. One of the first people, 100, 200 people in the United States of America to get COVID and survive. Ian Lipkin was in New York City for 9/11, of course. Ian Lipkin was involved in the West Nile virus outbreak. Reading that story, Ian Lipkin is, like a bad penny. He just keeps popping up all over the place. And according to this book, he's quite trusting and collaborative with Judy Mikovits.
I'm never going back to Reno, Mikovits replied, as clearly as she could. We'll see about that. See ya, the campus cop sneered. After about 2 hours, Mikovits was taken to the Ventura County Jail, booked, and told to stand for a mugshot. They gave her a thorough strip search, including a body cavity search for drugs, took her only jewelry, her wedding band, her baseball cap, and her clothes, and issued her a standard prison orange jumpsuit. She tried to use her allotted phone call to reach David, but outdated regulations disallowed calls to a cell phone. The only landline number she could remember was that of her longtime collaborator, Dr. Frank Rossetti, back in Maryland. Nobody was home, so the machine at his house picked up the call. Instead of allowing Mikovits to speak, all that was left on the machine was a disembodied robot-like voice saying, "You have a call from inmate." Later, Rossetti recalled having no idea what to make of the crazy message. Finally, she called a bail bondsman and tried to post the $100,000 bond which had been levied against her. The bondsman told her, with a tone of disbelief in his voice, that a bail hold had been placed on her case and she wouldn't be able to be released that day. "You must really have pissed off someone important," he said. "I never had a case where somebody was charged with stealing their own research," Bill Burns of 101 Bail Bonds later recounted. When a potential client contacted Bill, he usually performed a background investigation in order to get a sense of the person. Sometimes the people who found themselves arrested could be pretty smooth talkers, but their record usually told the real story. Burns talked to Mikovits' lawyer, who explained the nature of the dispute with the Whittemores, and then he did his own research. He was quickly able to find out she had no criminal history, that she was a well-regarded scientist, and her husband, David Nolde, had also never been in trouble with the law. A picture of his new client began to form in his mind. He had seen a similar scenario several times before, whether it was an overzealous district attorney unfairly prosecuting somebody, or when a wealthy individual had influence and knew how to make another person's life miserable. The information he gathered about Mikovits in a short period of time convinced him that something was definitely out of whack. "A lot of people suffer from this illusion of how great our legal system is," Burns later recounted, "and it really isn't great. You talk about third-world countries. You could feel like you're in a third-world country when you're locked up and trying to get out. You can't use the phone. You don't have the ability to mount a defense. It's amazing in a country of this size that a lot of people get screwed very badly in our system. It's very easy to end up losing everything on a case that shouldn't have even been brought." Determining if a potential client was trustworthy was important to Burns's business. Bail bonds don't get exonerated until the case is resolved, whether that takes 2 months or 2 years. The bail for Mikovits was $100,000, which meant she would put up 10% of that money up front. Burns would normally take a lien on her house or other property as collateral for the bond, but in this case he didn't have Mikovits or David Nolde sign over anything as collateral. I did $100,000 on a signature because I thought not only was the case full of shit, but everything about it was wrong, he later said. There were 3 holding cells in the basement of the Ventura County Courthouse. The cells were 6 by 8 feet, with a 3-foot-long steel bench, a small wall, and on the other side a steel commode, unfortunately without any toilet paper. The guards would alternate which cell a new prisoner would be put in, usually about 5 to a cell. When it was full, or the hour was late, the group of prisoners would be taken to the new Ventura County facility down the road. Many of the people in the holding cell were picked up that day for drug offenses or driving under the influence. For some of the prisoners, it was their appointment time to serve all or part of their sentence. These were people whose cases had already been heard, and due to the overcrowding of the jails and the relative minor nature of their offense, would serve just a few days. Shortly after Mikovits arrived in her cell, a woman named Karen, pseudonym, entered to serve her appointment time. She worked for a local newspaper, managing several of the vehicles which made early morning deliveries. She had been picked up on a minor drug possession charge, was convicted, and, as she told Mikovits, just wanted to put the mistake behind her and get it over with. Others were a little more frightening. One woman came in, teetering on 6-inch heels, her hair 18 different shades of the rainbow, clearly picked up for drugs. Karen and Judy exchanged thankful looks that she hadn't been put in their cell. As the hours passed, the cells continued to fill up, with some of them apparently regulars. They would warmly greet their fellow inmates or guards as they were processed in. At some point, one of the prisoners asked if any of them were first-timers. "I am," said Mikovits. In the late evening, probably around 10 or 11, Ruth, pseudonym, a distraught woman in her mid-50s, was brought into the jail. She was coughing and crying at the same time and lamenting that this was all a mistake. In the 6 or 7 hours Mikovits had been in the holding cell, she had learned a little about jail psychology. One didn't look directly at people, and one kept one's head down. Everybody else was avoiding looking at Ruth as well. "This is all wrong. This is a mistake," cried Ruth. "I shouldn't be here. I should be home." Mikovits knew just how she felt.
All right, I'm going to wrap it up there for now. I will probably resume playing this later on or tomorrow. This book, these 2 sections, these first couple of sections need to be gone over. I don't know if the whole book is necessary to cover. And I will remind you, okay, why are we looking at this? Why did Judy Mikovits come back up again? It was the Iran deal. It was this war in Iran. It was realizing how odd it was that someone that I collaborate with very extensively now is the only person who hasn't backstabbed me. Some of you in the chat here, of course, have been very nice, and when you have so much writing on this, Jonathan Cooey are definitely in the thick of this right now. And why was this woman, Piper Stover, used as one of many people to try to influence him somehow? It just doesn't make any sense. And I just find this one interview photo of and clearly it's in some location that's very pro-India based upon the artwork that's behind him, with a man named Richard Verma, who I've never heard of before. And Richard Verma is he's Canadian-born, barely, but, moved to the United States when he was younger. His family, of course, is Indian. And he went on to become the United States ambassador to India, an appointment which is very relevant because India, within the next 20 years or so, is going to be the highest GDP country on the planet. They are already the most populous country on the planet. China has a population pyramid which is an absolute catastrophe. They are going to have so many old people. I don't know how they're going to reproduce anymore. China is almost certainly doomed. Yeah, maybe they have a lot of money right now, but if you're thinking about world power, if you're thinking about the Human Genome Project, you have a 20, 40, 80, 100-year horizon. And anyone who knows the future right now is investing in India. So this ambassador role to India is very powerful. And he worked in the office, Richard Verma did, of Harry Reid, who is as probably as close a professional associate to the Whittemore family as you could imagine. I suspect that Richard Verma, having been from Pennsylvania and involved in this other cancer research center, the Winburn Center, which tangentially, of course, also involved Robert Malone pre 9/11, went on to, through his relationship with Harry Reid, maybe even suggest this Whittemore Peterson Institute. This is and through the connections with, of course, being the ambassador to India, some of the key people working with Robert Malone, including a man named Charim Ablashi, who's lived in the United States for quite a while, but another Indian man, co-founded something called the HHV6 Foundation with Annette Whittemore, I think in 2002 and 2003. I think this stuff was all by design. So by being encouraged to think more about nukes, because that's where the United States is over in Iran right now, or flew over Iran and bombed Iran, and Iran is threatening to build a nuke and blah, blah, blah. And of course, I have very unique, I should say, I have the courage to actually have a unique position on this. Most other people don't have the courage to have a unique position on nuclear weapons, but I do. One of the burdens of just being comfortable saying what you think, I guess. I don't know. We are here. We are here. And now it's time to really understand what Mikovits was doing out there. How did she wind up out there? And then realizing, oh my goodness, that is why the Whittemore family, it's not just the money. There's a lot of families that have $100 million in the United States. I mean, not millions, but families. But there's quite a few families that have hundreds of millions of dollars, and there's probably a few thousand families that have at least $1 billion. So the fact that they have money in and of themselves, it's not enough to be so central to this, nor is just having a relationship to Harry Reid. Those two things are very interesting, but there needed to be something else. And knowing the nature of where they decided to do this research for chronic fatigue syndrome and for autism now, and XMRV, this tells us that there was something related to genetics, I suspect. Now, it might not have been the fact that genetics are causal. It might have simply been trying to find a way to show that they were causal. I don't know. Still putting those pieces together. So we'll continue playing the narration for this. Thank goodness the narration's available. Saves me a lot of work. Allows me to kick back. I have the text for the first 3 chapters available online. Go to houstonic.live and go into the P's. You'll find Plague there. Or go to the Judy Mikovits page, of course, under the M's, and you can find a link to P. You can download the full PDF if you go to houstonic.live or houstonicits.com. Find the little book icon up on top somewhere in that menu, and there's a few dozen books. You can download the PDF. I don't have enough traffic because of censorship to really be doing anyone any serious damage with respect to any losses of revenue, but just the same, if you have the resources, I encourage you to, buy the book properly, even if you do want to download the PDF for convenience. All right, guys, thank you very much. Take care. See you next time. Have a great evening, and God bless.